everybody. This is Dr. Melissa Leedy
Hi.
and
Tiffany Turner Coates, board certified coach.
all right, so we are here with our very first video of the Wellness Warriors Collective. We're going to talk a little bit about muscle mass because Tiffany and I have both been reading about muscle mass and sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass as you age.
Right, which we all experience. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions about muscle mass. I mean, especially in women, there's a correlation between muscle mass and bulking up or, so we thought it would be a good topic to kind of cover and explain a little bit of
Yeah. So, because I've been on this like little personal research project of reading about muscle mass and aging and the prevention of osteoporosis and just longevity, and doing a lot of listening to podcasts, which I love. So, and Tiffany, as a personal trainer, has been in this realm for a long time. So, yeah. So what do you want to say?
Well, I mean, being in the, wellness arena and, kind of understanding the importance of muscle mass and realizing that, it's not super clear. It's one of those situations where there's so much information. But I mean, it is super important to just like overall body functionality to maintain your muscle mass and to keep building upon that and, incorporate strength training a couple of days a week, because it affects literally everything. And I don't think people realize that. I think there's just that association with like, oh, well, it's just my bone health, whatever, that can't be that big of a deal, but it really affects every aspect of your health.
So when you say it affects every aspect of your health, what do you mean?
So, I mean, it can affect blood pressure. It can affect your normal daily, like bodily functions. I mean, just as much as like, as you get older, it's more difficult to do things. You're more apt to injuries potentially. I mean, because of the bone decay that happens naturally in us, and something as like small as a sneeze could cause a fracture. I mean, that's a real story with older adults. Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really interesting is that, well, what I've been reading about is that the more muscle you have, the better your body metabolizes sugar. So, like a large percentage of our sugar, our glucose in our body, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but a large percentage of the sugar in our body is stored in your muscles. Your muscles need that glucose to work better and to grow. So the more muscle you have, like if you have insulin resistance or prediabetes or diabetes, the more muscle you have, the more your body is going to effectively use that glucose and essentially lower your markers of insulin resistance.
Right. I mean, it's helping you metabolize. I mean, that just to the long and short of it. Yeah.
So what else? What else do you have?
Yes. Okay. Oh.
Well, okay. I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about strength training, like what kind of strength training are you talking about? Like, are we talking about body weight, resistance bands? Do you have to lift like 40 pounds over your head strength training?
Right. I think that's kind of where one of the bigger misconceptions is. Strength training, doesn't mean that you're just, all of a sudden becoming a bodybuilder. I mean, it could be something that you're doing, 10-pound weights, but it's just the, it's, I can't think of the terminology for it now. I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, I mean, it's just increasing your muscle mass. I mean, and it, effectively can lower your heart rate. I mean, there's so many positives to it. And I mean, we know now, I mean, that it's something that you should definitely be incorporating at minimum 3 days a week. So, I mean, there's so many benefits to it. Heart health.
Right.
I mean, mobility in general.
Right. And I think there's also a misconception that as you age, that you're just automatically going to be losing muscle mass. Right? Because we see people who are, 50 and older or so, and, maybe they're losing muscle mass. And that's where the whole, term sarcopenia starts to come into play, is that you see this muscle mass as people age, or I'm sorry, this loss of muscle mass as people age,
it's a natural
which is associated with a lot of different health problems. But what we're saying is it doesn't have to be that way, that just because you are getting older, you're in midlife or older, does not mean that you can't and that you shouldn't be working on maintaining and growing your muscles. Obviously, probably need to talk to your physician about this and make sure it's safe for you to do. And if you don't know how to, gain muscle mass, to work with somebody who is knowledgeable in that area, talk with a physical therapist or a coach, things like that.
It definitely means, again, it's not just about, throwing around some heavy weights or kettlebells. I mean, it is strictly, you know, again, you could do body weight, light weights, but it is something that is like a necessary thing for us to be doing as we get older to prevent osteoporosis,
Right.
lower your heart
Right.
rate.
And to recover
Right,
from injury.
right.
Um,
Well, to keep you injury free. I mean,
well, right, to
you
prevent
know,
injury.
yeah.
Right. Right. So the other thing is like for one of my areas that I work a lot around is chronic pain and illness. And, even in that realm, learning how to move effectively, and to gain some muscle and gain some flexibility and have that. It's really hard for people who have chronic pain and illness because it hurts. Like if you haven't moved your body, if your joints haven't moved, if there's no lubrication, that type of stuff, it hurts to move your body. So I think that even for that population, that's something to think about and talk with the physical therapist about. How do you slowly build over time and stay consistent? Because it does protect protects your bones and it moves blood flow and all that kind of stuff.
Right, right. It feels like maybe it's like almost the antithesis of what you're doing when you're dealing with chronic pain. But I mean, really, it could, I mean, help in so many ways. Yeah, it could help mitigate some of that pain. You know, initially, like Melissa said, you know, talk to, you know, your physician or a physical therapist, but it could really provide actually a lot of relief long term.
Right, right. So what other notes do you have about
See.
muscle mass
I really just, you know,
or
fighting heart
myokines?
disease.
I sure like
Oh my
myokines.
gosh, I know. I mean, I just think overall just helping regulate, you know, healthy levels in your body. I mean, blood pressure, your heart rate. I mean, how many people are at risk for cardiac events? I mean, that's huge.
Right.
And to know that you have something that is available to you that is not a prescription, I mean, that you can do on your own or in a gym to help, you know, kind of mitigate some of those factors.
I think one of the biggest areas, and we've talked about this so many times, but you have all this information and then you don't do anything with it. And I don't remember who said it, but somebody said, it's not knowledge that's power, it's applied knowledge that's power. And I think about that all the time because, even for me, I struggle with being consistent, especially if you have any chronic health problems. Sometimes that's going to get in the way. So, what do you think about that? Like, if people are like, okay, yep, that's great, need to build up a little bit of muscle mass, but they are either slow to get started or they struggle to maintain a routine and a habit.
Right.
What are your thoughts on
Well,
that?
I think, I mean, you know, starting out a little slow is fine, but I think for people who are just kind of getting into it, finding some accountability, whether that is a spouse or a friend, or, you know, you're doing some kind of group training, because that seems to, you know, kind of really get the cycle going in a positive way where, you know, you're going to see some momentum there versus you just like, oh, you know, I'm just going to kind of dip my toe in the water and see how it goes. I mean, you know, we know how that typically goes.
Right.
Slow or not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things for me that I really like, I like old school, like paper calendar, and to, either write it on my calendar. So at the end of the month, I see more things filled in than not, or gold stars, I'm a gold star person.
Yes. Same.
But I think that another thing that happens for me is that I get into this perfectionistic mindset where like, okay, I'm going to do it today at this time, and then if I don't do it, then I'm like, well, I already didn't do it today when I could do it later, but then I I
Then
don't
you
I
kind of beat
don't
yourself up.
right.
It's kind of like this negative cycle. And I tell people that, I mean, it's just not like an all or nothing situation. Like, you know, I mean,
Right.
we've all been there like, oh, wow, I ate really horribly. So, like, why even go to the gym? Well, the next day is a new day. I
Right.
mean,
Well, the next minute is a new minute.
right, right.
Right.
So it's not a, you know, I think also the culture, the diet culture oftentimes is, you know, just there's such a big proponent to perfectionism. And I think just getting started is half the battle.
Right. Right. Yeah. So those are some things we might talk about a little bit later too, is just our mindset and how that works, our mindset and motivation and consistency and where we get stuck.
Right.
If we have a fixed mindset, a growth mindset, all kinds of things like that, that can maybe be helpful, just as something to think about. So, is there anything else you want to say?
I think also it's really important to kind of find what works for you. And it's not just something, when I say works for you, something that you enjoy doing. So, I mean, if you hate going to the gym and lifting weights, that's not something you're going to do. But if you enjoy being around other people and, working out in a group setting or, with a partner, then start there because you're going to have the most success.
Right.
If you don't enjoy doing it, it's not something that you're going to stick with long term.
Right. And
Yeah.
that stick with long term, that consistency seems to be the thing.
Right.
So, all right. Well, yeah, good little discussion.
Yeah.
There's so much more about this, like myokines. Look up myokines.
I mean, obsessed with it. I mean, we could talk
I
about
love
this
learning
all day
about
long.
myokines. So anyway, we could maybe talk about that a little bit later too. But anyway, hopefully this was helpful, and we will put another video out pretty soon about some other wellness topics. And if you want to do any coaching, if you need some of that accountability, Tiffany's available. Just go to legacycounselingservices.com, and there's a coaching inquiry form that you can click on. Tiffany's able to work with anybody throughout the United States virtually, or if you're in the Tulsa metro area, you can come to our offices.
Yeah. If you have any questions, happy to help.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
See you next time.